Welcome to the Real Freedom Podcast, where we inspire you to pursue your passion to gain time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. I'm your host, Mike Swenson. Let's get some real freedom together. All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Real Freedom Podcast, where we're talking about building wealth and creating time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. And today I've got Kase Knochenhauer here, and he is a great example of this. You've built and grown a business to the point where you and your family can go travel this fall, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But flipping 60 homes a year, you've acquired 120 rental properties, and since then you've enjoyed the freedom here, which I love in your bio. It says, since the pandemic, you've purchased a commercial airplane fuselage, a 42-foot school bus, an ambulance, imported $900,000 in classic Land Rover Defenders, and purchased 14 cubic yards of winter beanies. People that don't have time and financial freedom can't do that kind of stuff. And so we're excited to hear why you're doing that, how you're doing that, and how you built and grew your business to have that freedom. So welcome, Kase. We're so excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Share about your background, getting into real estate, how you've built and grown your team. You're very purposeful in how you've done it.
Yeah, so I didn't know I'd be in real estate 8 years ago now. So I 2016 accidentally became a real estate agent when I was telling a friend of mine to go be a real estate agent who was trying to figure out what he was doing with his life. Mm-hmm. And he didn't do it, so I did it. And here I am. So it's been 2016 was sort of a disastrous year for me. I did a lot more education than I did prospecting. And so I believe I sold 3 homes my first year, kicked it in gear, and we ended up, I think, sold 40 or 42 or something like that. And I'm like, oh, this is great, but I was working too hard. So I'm like, I'll start a team. And then I had a real estate team. And a year later, we opened a brokerage. And that was the year I realized, like, I don't like being a team leader. I found out that the profits were it was challenging. I was trying to do everything myself. We grew, and I probably wasn't as selective in terms of my hiring as I should have been. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was it was a lot of growth very quickly, and it was fun, but it was also extremely stressful. And I did taxes, in April or May or whatever it was. And I looked at both my income, and I made more money flipping houses. And I think I sold like 4 flips that year than I did in my flip business, my real estate team. And I'm like, oh, yikes. Mm-hmm. I need to figure something out. So I happened to read a book, 80-20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall. Very good book. And he talks about how 20% of the efforts give you 80% of the profit, but it's also fractal. So, if the 5% of the 5%, or 20% of the 20% gets you 5%, which makes 50% of the results come from just 5% of the effort. Mm-hmm. And so I started doing the math, and I'm like, holy cow, like that's like perfectly accurate. 5% of my effort gave me half my profit. So we rapidly changed. I brought on one of my agents as a partner, and he's now the integrator in my business. But since late 18, we've been really focusing on flipping. So I don't list my own houses anymore. We have a broker, 2 real estate agents that work for us, and we outsource all our listings to a third-party team. So yeah, that's sort of how our team has changed and modified. And the idea that's purposeful. I didn't know I'd be here, but we've definitely purposely been changing our business to meet our lifestyle. And I didn't know I'd be here, and I kind of know what next year and the year after looks like, but people talk about 3 and 5 year vision, and that's a challenging thing for me to really know where I'm even going to be in 3 to 5 years.
So talk about, as we dig in, how are you starting by finding the properties that you're going to work on? I know so many people always have questions. It's how do I get started? How do I get started? How do I get started? So where were you finding those first initial deals? And then as you grew the flip business, how did you find the crews and all that to be able to do the properties to where now you have a scalable flipping business?
So I found mine accidentally, my first few.
So you got into real estate accidentally, and you found your first flip accidentally. Yeah. It's just the stars are aligning for you.
Yeah, no, it was, I listed a house, I think it was a for sale by owner, and it was in rough condition. It needed a new septic system, a new well. And she was on the market long enough. She got sick and tired of it. And she's like, oh, I just want to sell this thing. And so she started naming numbers. I'm like, well, I could maybe pay that. And so I bought it. And that was my first flip. But so that was on accident. But let's talk about today. So we do everything. People ask me a lot, like, what's the right form of marketing? And Mike and Kase, our form of marketing might be different, and it's okay. And so a lot of it comes down to, really two things. And it's, do you have more time or do you have more money? And we balance, we'll back up a little bit and talk about a funnel. So, marketing funnels in any industry, the cheaper the lead, the higher in the funnel they are. And the more expensive the lead, typically the lower in the funnel they are. And so when it comes to a real estate team, if you guys are looking for buyer leads, Facebook ads might be a great way to get really cheap $3 Facebook leads. And you have to get 200 of them to get a contract or something. But a really intentional seller would be like perhaps a Google PPC on best agent in Minneapolis or something like that, right? So that's somebody that's going to be a lot lower down the list in terms of moving forward. So when it comes to how do I get started, the first thing I'd look at is are you broke? Do you have money? Do you have any knowledge? That's a big thing. And then what sort of time do you have? Because there's a lot of ways to find deals for free. I'll give you an example. We bought 14 houses off the MLS this year. And, we as an agent have no more ability to find homes on the market than any Joe Schmo with no real estate license, because it's all online. It's available on Zillow and realtor.com, and everything I see, you guys can see. So we got 14 houses, and most people are like, nah, it's impossible. But our average profit.
That's actually a lot of our investor deals too have come from the MLS.
Yeah, I think we flipped 14 houses, and I think we acquired 30 rental units or something last year, a bunch of small multis. But yeah, MLS deals are, often not a slam dunk, but you can get good deals. I think we had a $70,000 flip in Kalamazoo last year off of an MLS purchase. And it was a $220,000 house that we bought it for. So it was the margins were great. And it was I think our most profitable flip last year was an MLS deal. So yeah, they're everywhere. And what marketing source, you can't really answer. Because if you got no time, I'm going to tell you something else. And if you have no money, there's lots of free lead sources out there.
Yeah. So, okay. So then as you guys were developing your rental business, how are you deciding what are you looking to just flip and sell, and how are you deciding what to keep? Now, are your rental properties that you're keeping, is this just you and your family, or do you have partners on certain deals, or is it kind of a hodgepodge mix? Or
it's a hodgepodge mix. So my partner Tyler, who's the integrator in my flipping business, he and I own 30-40 rental units together, something like that. And then my wife and I own the other 60 some. In terms of making a decision, some of it comes down to what type of money we have. So if we don't have the money available to purchase a rental at this point in time, sometimes I need to have the cash, so we'll sell it as a flip when I meant to buy it as a rental. Some of it's down to a 1031. I'm closing 2 properties a week from today, and we're doing that on a 1031 exchange. And I wouldn't have bought one of them as a rental for sure, but to meet the guidance and requirements of a 1031, I have to use it as a rental. So I'm going to use it as a rental for a little bit, and it's going to, the numbers don't cash flow as well as I'd hope, but I'm tying up a lot of equity and I can avoid the capital gains on that. So it works. So sometimes it's taxable benefits. We also, now that we're to, I think we've sold some, so we're down to, I think, 95 units at this point. But some of it's just, cash availability. But I also balance our purchases because we do cost segregation studies on the purchases we make to offset our income. And so a lot of it's how much have we bought this year to offset our flip income? And so, it's just a number of variables. But, in general, we sort of aim for at least the 1.2 or 1.4% rule. So some people look at 1 or 2% rule. So that's kind of our numbers. If it's not going to be if the rent is 1.2 or maybe 1.4% of the purchase price, that may make a good rental, just in general for us.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of places around the United States can't even blink to, or can't even find a 1%er.
Yeah.
So yeah, 1.2 to 1.4. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And we get a handful at, class, solid class C's at 2% or something like that, but they're rough. And I've unfortunately found that, when you underwrite a property like that, you never get the returns you expect. I bought a 24 unit apartment complex class C, and my goal is to turn it into a class B, but I expected like 50% payment. So 24 units, and I thought 50% of them would pay me. And I thought that's really pessimistic. There's no way it's under that. My first month, I got 3 rent payments.
Out of 24 units.
Out of 24 units.
And a half. Yeah.
And yeah, turned out the seller was like criminal and absolutely a slumlord. So I feel really good about improving the neighborhood. But, unfortunately, when you buy these properties that can be very lucrative, often you have a lot of those much larger problems that you didn't calculate for.
I think somebody that is outside looking to get into real estate, looking to get into investing is like, oh, here's this guy that's got this great portfolio. He's got some time freedom. Oh, everything, like the stars have just aligned for you. And that's how you're able to make that happen. Well, here's a great example of, not every deal is a slam dunk. You're going to have to overcome challenges. And yeah, when it turns out you get 12% people paying rent in a month, you got to figure that out. So so you haven't had anything just kind of handed to you, or just all that, like I said, all that luck is kind of lined up. You've had to overcome some challenges.
Yeah, we started from scratch. Our first rental we bought, we paid cash for, which sounds like, oh, well, you're lucky. But we did it by creating a home equity line of credit. We bought our house off of a teacher's salary, and we opened a HELOC on the property and used that to buy a $82,000 or $84,000 duplex. We then cash out refied it. So we did a BRRRR on that home. And that was our first BRRRR property. I think we've done 30 cash outs. At this point, everything we're doing is DSCR, debt now. So we don't qualify. I don't qualify for mortgages, which is, I laugh at. It's all portfolio refinances. So right now, I think we're refinancing 7 or 8 properties that we own cash, and we're just pulling our money out and recycling it to other ones. So most of the properties we buy are value add. I don't buy anything turnkey. So I go buy a property that, let's call it $100,000. And in fact, I'll give you a real example. I'm buying a duplex for $120,000 on Friday, and we'll be putting probably 60 into it. So we'll have 180 into it. My ARV on it should be somewhere between 250 and 300 when I'm done with it. So I expect to cash out refi that in November or December. So about 3 months from now. And my goal is to get all my money back plus a little bit more. Now, what's cool though, is this is a 1031. So I'm going to buy it with cash, rehab the property, rent it out, refinance. And now I'm going to get all of my refinance money tax-free. And all I did is replace it. So like the great thing is, refinances are non-taxable events. So it's the BRRRR process is just really, really a miracle, sort of.
So 2 questions here. My first question is, you had talked about doing some deals with your work partner here. What advice do you have, or what was your logic around that? We have this conversation. My mindset typically has been, with my teammates, I want to try to we always talk about growing the pie together. Let's focus on growing the pie together. Some people are saying, well, why would I give up a certain percentage or something like that? What was the conversation you guys had when it came to doing a deal together? And, there's a lot of horror stories about having partners and not working out. Obviously yours is working out well. So talk about that dynamic a little bit, and the decision-making and the thought process around it.
Yeah. So in our flip business, most of the time, Tyler's final decision. So although I'm the majority owner of the company, because he's the integrator and he's involved in the small details of the company, 95 times out of 100, I say, I think you're going to be the person to make this decision. And as the visionary, it's sort of been up to me to like rein him in and not have him be so overly detailed that we track like everything. Right. So that's been really important. And I think the same thing's true is, we know who's in charge of making decisions in the flip business. And so in our business, we know like, okay, Kase ultimately can say, Tyler, stop doing that. And so what we did when we decided to start investing together is I turned the tables, and although we're 50-50 partners in our operating agreement, he's the deciding factor. So I did that because I didn't want to be the boss who owned the property and could decide when to buy or sell. And so I'm probably a year and a half to 2 years in front of Tyler in our investment sort of path. And so I wanted him to be able to sort of choose what those assets look like. Are we buying value add properties? Are we buying small multis? Are we turning our small things into apartment complexes or triple net investments? So the idea was to sort of have him drive that portfolio. But it's hard though, right? Because when you're friends with your partner and your partner is either in front of you or behind you, sometimes you do investment things that you otherwise wouldn't have done. But the key, I think, is making sure that there is a decision maker all the time. Never do a 50-50 partner. If it's a third, I don't care what the ownership structure is, make sure that there's one person as the dictator. And so for me, I didn't want to be the dictator. So Tyler's in charge and can sell without my permission. So partnerships are great. They're rewarding. In our flip business, we scaled because we brought on another investor that funded our flips, and in exchange, we gave him a percentage of the profit. We were able to go from X to 3X because of that. And yeah, partnerships have been key to the growth and success that we've seen. Yeah, because like I'm a very small part of the picture when it comes to the business that we run.
The follow-up question, and then I'll get to my second question. Follow-up question on that is, how are you deciding what properties are going to be for you and your wife and your family, and which ones are going to be a part with your partner?
My wife and I are really trying to focus on apartment complexes at this point, and we'd like to start moving our funds into triple net assets. So it's very rare that we go buy a duplex. So right at this point, we've got our two entities a very different focus. So it's very clear who falls under who.
Yep.
I bought a duplex and a single family as part of this 1031, but it's more of a weird tax circumstance than anything. They were just small properties, and I couldn't elect something else, so I just picked the wrong asset, which I don't really want, but it works okay. We also do compensate. So because our flip company generates these leads, when I buy a property or my partner and I buy a property, we're paying our flip company compensation through either a commission or a wholesale fee. So we make sure that each entity is sort of separate. So if I buy something, the flip company still earns from the acquisition.
So then, as you guys are doing all the work on the homes, is it you have internal crews, or you have folks that you've partnered with, vendors that are doing a lot of the work? How are you deciding who's doing the work?
Yeah, we've got 9 construction crews across most of the west half of Michigan. And they're sort of all geographically centered in Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Muskegon, or Holland. And so most of them are willing to travel about 45 minutes. And so we're able to use those crews to coordinate our turns. So those 9 crews are constantly turning properties.
So these are crews that your company owns and pays them out of, or are they their own company? That's
correct. Yeah, they're 1099 contractors. So I can pay them either as an individual or as a 1099 contractor, as a company. But yeah,
so it's not like your real estate company hires them as W-2 employees.
Correct. Yep. They're 1099 contractors, not W-2. So we thought about hiring like a 10 or a W-2 handyman so that we can move him around and sort of wrap up jobs because we can be a little more selective with movement. Because like I have to call a contractor and ask him if he wants the job, right? I say, hey, I got a job. It's a little further than I got a contractor that's traveling an hour and 20 minutes right now, which they don't like, right? So I have to be super nice to them, because if they drive that far, 2 flips in a row, they're going to be pissed. They're going to stop working with me. So everything's about making sure that's a win-win relationship. So I talk to the contractors 2 to 3 times a week at minimum. And I don't think it takes that long to manage crews. We thought about hiring somebody, but we use a program called Company Cam so that our contractors take pictures and we can see the status and where things are. But yeah, that's sort of what the construction teams look like anyway.
Talk about the evolution here as you went from kind of agent to team to brokerage. That seems to be a path that a lot of folks, as they get into real estate, take.
It's a terrible path.
I know.
Don't take that path.
You mentioned about the broker piece. So I'd love to just kind of hear a little bit about that experience for you and the decision making and the thought behind it. And yeah, what ended up going wrong on that path there?
I think the path I took was because that's what people did. not because I was thinking, right? So
Yep.
when I was a very profitable individual agent, very profitable, like zero expenses, because all I did was call FSBOs and expireds. So like
Mm-hmm.
my running cost was like, $200 a month of technology. It was crazy. I'd love to have $200 a month now of expenses.
Yeah.
And my growth to team was like, okay, well, that's the next step, right? I hire an assistant and I hire this. And like, that's what's known in the real estate industry. Then I'd been an agent for 3 years. And I'm like, oh, I'm paying like so much money to this brokerage. And they also don't like the team, because when you disrupt an industry for the good or the bad, you piss people off.
Yep.
And so I was tired of people complaining, to be honest. So I'm like, all right, I mean, I'll just go get my own office. But they told me I couldn't unless I was my own brokerage. So I'm like, all right, whatever, I'll do that. So we opened a brokerage, and we actually brought in a national franchise, a low cost, fixed per transaction fee. And that was my disaster. They're a good brokerage. I think I was the wrong person in the right seat, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, yeah, I just found it to be a big, expensive mistake. And I think a lot of people think like this is the next step in real estate, but they're always thinking going forward, but sometimes we need to turn. And so the facing like, okay, I'm going to start acquiring properties, and I'm going to start like I bought sort of a couple as a real estate agent, but it was more like it was my investment, not my job. And so I realized like, oh man, I could do this full time. And the realization that like, okay, I work really hard to make 100 grand or 150 grand. Like I work my tail off as an agent, but I can go buy 3 flips and I can make $30,000. And like, that's not very hard work. And so I just kind of realized like, wow, there's less friction. There's less competition. It's higher risk, but you also bring in partners to help absorb that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of the path that I took. But I also had the experience as a real estate agent to know what a team looked like. So without having run a disastrous brokerage, I would not have been able to grow the flipping team that I have now, because it oddly looks extremely similar. We have a transaction coordinator. I have our contractors, of course. We've got 4 virtual assistants from the Philippines that are run part of our sales team. And then we have 2 local. My partner is one of our sales guys, and then he has an assistant. And so, yeah, they run our whole sales department. And so amazingly, like, we run them like extremely similar to a small 3 or 4 person real estate team.
Yeah. And kind of along that note, we had talked offline about kind of this visionary integrator type role and the importance of that and how that works well. So talk about, now that you kind of mentioned the team here, talk about just your thoughts on hiring, building people, helping train them. And also too, like, you seem to have a good sense of knowing to get the heck out of the way and let other people do what they're supposed to do, and so I'd love to just kind of hear you chat about your team a little bit.
I hope so. Tyler, I think sometimes thinks I'm a little too involved. I disappeared for a week and the team had more contracts than when we started, and more properties under contract and more money. And I'm like, this is great. I need to go on vacation more often.
Mm-hmm. So
I've learned that like with employees that they're going to do it differently, and different's okay. And they're often better at it than you are. Mm-hmm. And just because it's different doesn't matter. But in general, the mistakes I've made is I've tried to hire the cheapest employee that can do the job, but it's a lot better to way overpay your employees and offer massive flexibility in terms of vacation, in terms of pay, in terms of investments. So like we are actively creating an investment platform for our employees, everything from my partner to our lowest paid Filipino employee. We want them to have the ability to invest at a rate that they're expecting and make it competitive, and then also invite them in to share with the profit share. So that's been a really important part of it, is have them like an employee owned portion of the company. So we, for the most part, I think all of our employees have some sort of profit share that are involved. Actually, everybody locally is. Our Filipino staff are bonused, but it's not a written part of their contract. Yeah, partnerships though, Tyler and I sort of run together, and as best as I can explain, I sort of make a big mess in front of him, and he sort of picks up the pieces and makes it really understandable for the team behind me. And I'd say that's a pretty easy picture of what our relationship looks like.
That's actually an analogy that I use a lot when talking about kind of that visionary integrator type role. Is it's that balance that makes things working well. And I was actually just listening to a podcast, and they said, if you hire two of the same people, you really don't need one of them. And so what you need is that different dynamic. You need the kind of the yin yang type mentality where it's, this person completes me because my strengths are over here, their strengths are over here, and we really enhance each other. And kind of that 1 + 1 = 3 type mentality.
Yeah. And we use the disc profile. And so oftentimes you'll see like people want to hire the same disc as they are, but it's a very bad idea. Hire somebody that's the absolute opposite. So if you're a high D, high C, hire an IS, because you need the sales guy, or somebody that understands people. So so that's the interesting thing. You're exactly right. That's why husband and wives are often so different. When one is strong, the other's weak. And the same thing's true in a business partnership.
Okay. So talk a little bit about the future here. I'd love to hear where you see this going. And then let's talk about your trip, being able to, we talk about the time and financial freedom through the opportunities here in real estate. So talk about how what you've worked on over these last few years have allowed you to do what you're going to do here this upcoming fall into the winter.
Yeah. The last 4 years I've worked a lot, and for me, I've worked a lot. So I'm in my mind, 45 or 50 hours a week is like a terminal point that I'm no longer productive. And I enjoy working, but I also have a 2.5 and a 4.5-year-old at this point, and they're only getting older, and we're not having any more children. So it's important that I spend some time and take time with them and be purposeful with it. So I've adjusted my schedule, and I'm breaking the rules a little bit right now. But my goal is between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. on a daily basis, and then between 1 and 3. So I'd actually like to get my afternoons down to a whole hour, which would be fantastic. And so that's the new schedule that I've set. When I do that 6 days a week, and I found that I'm able to be almost as productive as when I work full time. And then I'm present and there for my wife and my kids. So that's been the new goal as of the last few weeks, which is very exciting. So that's in preparation for a road trip in a Toyota Tacoma with a little slide-in camper, an Alucab Kaya, which is pretty sweet. The 4 of us and our dog are going to go, and we're going to travel for 2.5 months straight, and then also a couple small week or 2-week trips between the spring and the fall. So that's sort of my personal side. But the whole design of the business at this point has been creating a life and not having so many people report to me that I have to answer my phone constantly. And that's what I realized as a team leader is people want to talk to Kase, right? It was all the time. And like owners pissed, sellers pissed, buyers agents upset, talk to Kase, like the team leader. And so by turning our company into a company, nobody knows who Kase is. And so everybody handles the problems on their own. And then when something really bad happens, most of the time it can wait till our Tuesday meeting. And so we run through an EOS program, which we started about 12 months ago. And so most of the time our problem solving is on Tuesday, and almost everything can wait till the next day now, which is very exciting. I can turn my phone off at 4:00, and I almost never have missed calls the next day, which that would never have happened 3 or 4 years ago. So moving forward though, I think our team's going to continue doing what it's doing. I think growing in the number of flips is probably unreasonable without really changing the structure of our team. So we'll probably just look at larger acquisitions. What's it look like to flip an apartment complex? What's it look like to move to larger industrial assets? So I think our team as it sits probably won't change in a significant manner, maybe 1, possibly 2 more hires. But as it stands, we have a sales manager, an operations manager, and then they sort of all have 3 or 4 people underneath them. So they've at this point really handled the team very nicely.
Yeah, it seems to be a natural progression in terms of the smaller stuff to the bigger stuff. Just the economies of scale, kind of doing the same amount of work, and it's just more units and a little bit of diversity too. When you've got a duplex and there's somebody that's not paying rent or a problem, that's 50% of your cash flow. If you've got a 10 unit or a 20 unit or more, there's a little bit more diversification that happens there. So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom. If people want to get a hold of you or kind of learn more about you, where can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. My wife runs our Instagram page. and it's nothing but family pictures on our overland trip. So it's Overland Investor or at Overland Investor or something like that. And then if you do want to talk about investing with us, we have partners that come on and invest with us and can earn either profit share or interest. And you're able to do that at overlandinvestor.com.
Awesome. So, well, thank you so much, Kase, for coming on, and appreciate it. And you've got an awesome story to share, and just a great way of being efficient with your time. I think, so many people try to do so many things, and you've followed a logical process and built and grown nicely for you. So congratulations on that, and best of luck to you guys in the future.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure.